Why does this logo look good and this logo not look good? Well, all has to do with a concept known as contrast. Picking out which color goes with another color actually has surprisingly little to do with the color itself. Huh? Let me explain. The contrast that you pick between colors is more important than the colors that you pick themselves. You can see that the examples that I'm giving over here have different brightness levels and saturation levels, which is the intensity, but contrast is much better on some versus others. One important note when talking about contrast is there's an effect called Chromosteropsis, which basically means it's hard for your eyes to see these colors against each other. So these color combinations over here are ones that you would want to avoid when choosing colors because it's just hard on the eyes to see, as you might notice. On the other hand, in order to pick good contrast, we can use the color wheel to see what will have good contrast against another color. And when two colors like yellow and blue are opposite each other on the color wheel, they often have good contrast of hue over here. Or if I chose green over here for the text, I can go over to have pink in the background over here and make the background pink. Those have high levels of contrast, but it's not often good enough for the text to stand out. So you might have to use other forms of hue, such as the hue of contrast of tint and shade. Yellow and green over here, which look like they don't go together, but what I could do is I could go and I could reduce the brightness of the yellow so that it pops more against the light green. Or what I could do is I could go to the green background over here and I can reduce the brightness so that this is darker to help make the yellow pop more. You could also modify the contrast of something by making it less intense, which would draw less attention to that word in particular. So if you didn't want to draw all of the attention to the word, but some of it, maybe you want to make the saturation lower as opposed to having it all the way up where that intensity really pops against the green. The amount of intensity or saturation that we use in color depends on how much you want someone's attention to be drawn towards that. You can see that by having things less saturated and having one thing more saturated, we're able to draw our attention to the yellow circle over here. Or if I really want to make the Sour Patch Kids stand out, I could lower the brightness of the background in order to really make it stand out using the concept of contrast. Let's study the McDonald's logo. So over here, if we were to remove all saturation from the image, we'd be able to see which is the brightest color. So McDonald's is the whitest, followed by the art, followed by the background. So that is the order in which they wanted you to notice the words. And the colors that they chose for the saturation that they chose was using white, yellow, and red. You can also use contrast to bring attention to certain things. I highlighted the M with a shadow so that you would look at the M before reading the word McDonald's. So if you wanted the audience to look at one thing in particular, you might want to consider giving some sort of shadow effect to really make what you want pop. Using contrast, I used a dark color against the intense yellow. Now let's see how this effect was used on the Twizzlers. The Twizzlers design over here, they wanted you to read this: Twizzlers first, then Twists second, strawberry third, artificially flavored fourth, and then this code fifth over here. They designed the contrasts so that you would read the words in a certain order. And in order to compensate for the fact that if we reduced all saturation, you look at Twizzlers over here compared to Twists, the Twizzlers is just a little bit lighter than Twists over here. The yellow over here just has a little bit lower intensity than the light, and it's a lot bigger, which has better proximity, and they included a little shadow, just like I did for the McDonald's logo, to make this stand out just a little bit more than the word twist. It's saying, this is Twizzlers, but we also want you to know, and it's really important, that this is Twizzlers Twists, as opposed to one of the other market or brands that they have out there. So this is how they used contrast to get you to read in a certain order what their product is, in order to make what they wanted you to see to stand out. And the more you look at other products, the more you'll notice how they used contrast to make certain words stand out so that you'd read it in a certain order. And you can kind of see the hierarchy of what you're supposed to read first and second and third.